brutality of ISIS continues. The Russians are invading Ukraine, and the Palestinians and Israelis continue to slug it out. Does that make you feel gloomy? Well, don't. We will explain everything in a bit.
I am Saroj Ali, 31057. Our topic is the ethical issues of war, presented by Group 4. Is war justifiable to achieve war objectives? Is our issue statement. Throughout the presentation, we will be discussing whether war is justifiable to achieve just or unjust causes. Group 4 includes Muhammad Hashim, Saroj, Khola, Habiba, Sayyida Zara, Munazza, Sher Bano, Aisha, Fatma, and Iman.
Hello, I am Sayyida Zara Akbar, ID 31282. Let's talk about the table of content. Our presentation includes number 1, definition of war. Number 2, option 1, arguments in favor of option 1 and arguments against this option. Number 3, option 2, arguments in favor of this option as well as against it. And at the end will be the chosen options and our arguments in favor of them relative to the ethical theories.
Hello, I'm Fatma Haroon, ID 31642, and I'll be explaining to you about war. So let's see what war actually is. War is intense armed conflict between states, governments, societies, or military groups. It is generally characterized by extreme violence, aggression, destruction, using regular or irregular military forces. Well, that's how a dictionary describes it, but in fact it's something much worse. War is the epitome of what's wrong with human nature, and it's very devastating.
I am Habiba Sardar. My ID is 31151. Let's begin with option 1. War is justifiable to achieve just causes. So what is just causes? Just causes means a legal sufficient reason, so a war should only be fought when all other peaceful options have been exhausted. Even then, there should be moral causes to initiate such a horrific act. First are the arguments in favor. The first valid reason of such causes is an invasion or forced merger by another country which is done by the use of military offense with the objective of conquering another nation. This is an act of self-defense against an aggression and the best form of ethical war. Thank you.
Number 2 is the assassination of an important person, such as a monarch or a president. The act of deliberately killing a prominent person is usually prompted by religious, political, or military reasons. On the idea of avenging their death, a war could start. Number 3 is assisting a neighboring country or an ally that is under attack. It is always ethically right and also a moral responsibility of an individual or a state to help its ally or neighbor in need.
I am Khola Shahid, ID 31102. Continuing on with the arguments in favor, a major cause to start a war could be the human rights violation. When words and negotiation don't work in restoring human rights, swear measures such as a war would take place to put right an act of violation. And finally, a reason to initiate a just war would be to punish the act of aggression. Although many agree with it, some people don't see it as ethically correct because a war of punishment could never be a war.
I am Munazza Khan. Moving on to argument against option 1. Argument number 1 is that war has many adverse negative effects not only between two countries but globally. It can often lead to seriously troubling effects such as a spread of diseases, various injuries to soldiers and civilians, psychological traumas, physical disabilities, and at times even death.
I am Aisha Irfan and my ID is 31402. Secondly, instead of opting for war, countries should focus more on talks and negotiation based on the issue caused. From past records, it can be seen that war conflicts had resolved nothing between any countries. Rather than worsen the condition, they should take the high road and one that is ethically correct. Thirdly, a war can completely sabotage or destroy one's country economy, land, water, crops, and climate conditions, resulting not only in human life loss but all are nature-related and economical loss that could affect a wild ecosystem and disturb the balance of nature.
I am Shirpanu 31338 in favor of arguments against option 1. A cause of war is the desire to rule other against their will on the pretext that it is for the good. An example of this point could be explained by mentioning different countries that are being controlled by the superpowers through background channels, like Japan being controlled by America. Lastly, wars such as the Civil War or martial laws happen to overthrow a government, which can ruin the established system, way of life, and network of multiple communities involved.
I am Muhammad Hashim, ID 30339. I will be discussing our second option, which says that war are justifiable to achieve unjust causes. What are unjust causes? An unjust cause is one that is not based on or behaving according to what is morally right and fair. To justify an unethical war is a difficult task, but it can be justified on many bases. In the world of growing powers and strong economies, the interests of our own country and people are the most important, no matter what the circumstances. Hence, following are the points that can support an unethical, unjust war.
I am Emmanuel, ID 31679, and I am starting off with arguments in favor. Although harsh but true, war is used as a means to control the population and test their will to survive. Thus, in war, natural selection is going in its purest form. Also, an act of war may be for the desire of richer land to increase the economic strength of a nation. History is a witness that many wars that shook the planets to its core occurred because of the greed and immoral needs of authorities to acquire better land and resources. Like the British occupancy of the subcontinent, it was all a game of economic war played with the Indians to occupy their land that was rich in minerals and spices.
Point number 3. Such a cause is fear of something uncertain, like the fear that your enemy might be growing stronger and the need to eliminate them before they become a potential threat to your nation. Wars like the US Afghan War and the Saudi Iran War don't have a solid reason behind them. They are just being fought because all these nations are struggling to acquire power and higher position. Moving on to point number 4. Spreading your borders for territorial gains. These are conflicts that are fought indirectly between opposing powers in a third country. Each power supports the side which best suits their military interests and economic interests. These are called proxy wars. Point number 5. A nuclear war to kill those opposing in one shot rather than deploying multiple soldiers and risking their lives and the lives of their families. Although in general it is ethically wrong, but it does save the lives of many from the attacking nation.
I, Sayyida Zara Akbar, ID 31282, respectfully disagree that wars are justifiable to achieve unjust causes. A chaos due to a war in a country can lead to a serious, immoral, and brutal act of terrorism and havoc like killing in the name of institution, power, and politics. Such acts of terror can create serious problems within the state and its people. In order for a war to happen, the need of armed forces and soldiers are important, as these soldiers shall be trained heartless and brutal that will go against their nature and kill innocent people whom armed weren't supposed to kill, nor those innocent lives deserve such injustice. A war with such immoral acts can seriously cause psychological traumas such as bad humor, starvation, humiliation, lack of basic rights, and worse, death. This could create a huge burden on both the economy and lives of innocent people.
To attack on the basis of fear of a preemptive strike is injustice. A preemptive strike means attacking the enemy to prevent an anticipated attack by them. They may no longer be acceptable by UN members since the Charter says, all members shall settle their international disputes by peaceful means. In shorter words, they deemed it ethically wrong. For instance, a war took place for just reasons and there is a win in a war for a nation, the infrastructure of all places will be immensely affected as the bridges, roads, homes, hospitals, etc. have been demolished. It will take multiple years before these facilities are built and are used again. So it is unethical to destroy multiple communities and traumatize them.
And our final point is that nuclear wars, often having atomic bombs involved, consist of tons of uranium that can kill millions of people, children, old, and innocent lives, which is likely to be straight unethical and immoral acts. A clear example of that is the atomic bomb attack on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, where millions of people died, faced numerous disabilities, and loss of vegetation and plants for more than 30 years. Wars which lack causes of either sort are wars of savages. There are certain causes which present a false appearance of justice. The causes which are thought to being just, when examined under the light of reasoning, are found to be unjust. In such cases, it is clear that a decision is based not on what's right, but on violence. For some people, the term peace and war are like coins, to obtain not what is right, but what is advantageous. Now that we described and explained both viewpoints on both opinions, our final decision is that we agree with option 1. War is justifiable to achieve just causes.
The first, main, and only cause for a war should be an act of defense and nothing more, if we want it to stay as ethical and morally right as possible. When looking in relation to ethical absolutism, there should be some basic rules of war that apply universally irrelevant of the location and culture. These rules should be based on the universal rights of humanity, where right and wrong are objective quantities that can be rationally determined.
Now that we have established that war should be an act of self-defense, let's talk about its aim. The aim of a self-defense war would be not to destroy, torture, or kill, but to push back and protect what is already their own and to establish a lasting peace. This would be an ethical, just war. The government has a duty to its people to protect and do what is obligatory to safeguard its people. Therefore, ethics of duties is considered here to initiate a war as an act of self-defense.
Other than self-defense, a war should only start if a specific country is promoting terrorism, killing innocent people, putting the lives in its neighboring countries in danger, or doing any other immoral acts. A war against that country should carry out. Here we apply the ethics of right and justice, where everything should be fair and certain basic important, unalienable entitlements that should be respected and protected in every single action to all the human beings, without exception.
Sometimes the reason behind a war would only be understood by a certain region or group of people. But despite the lack of universal understanding, every country has a right to fight for the preservation of their culture, tradition, faith, religion, and history that might be endangered by an opposing country. This is where ethical relativism applies, as morality is context dependent and objective to a community's location, history, and culture.
Put all moral deeds, thoughts, and theories aside. War is sometimes a necessary evil, an immoral and unethical act that needs to happen in order for good to return and for evil to be vanished. It can allow the right people to gain power and for the criminals to be punished for their crimes. We apply the ethics of right and justice because everyone has the right to their life, freedom, and their property. This kind of work could bring about a fair and just system and removing the imbalance in society. This results in fair outcomes where the consequences are distributed in a just manner, also known as distributive justice. Everyone gets an equal chance and no one is oppressed or treated unfairly.
Point number 6. When a war is fought for a just cause, the whole population is taken into consideration, and the motives and greed of one person or group is not the focus when initiating a war. So the theory of egoism is ruled out here. A government character and integrity should be intact because a false war or a pointless war will be of harm to countless others by having a virtue. Whatever action is taken would be selfless and based on good of many and not for the desire and self-interest of one individual or organization. So the ethical theory of utilitarianism will be applied while initiating a war.
For a just war, there are some ethical rules set in place in order to protect the innocent, such as the enemy combatants and enemy non-combatants are distinguished. War is fought far away from densely populated places. The harm that is caused should be proportional to the justice or gain. The action must be a necessity and not a need or a want. This is a clear example of the application of ethical absolutism, where ethical rules are universal and no one is an exception to these rules.
A just war is fought with the intention and probability of winning so that the fighters fight for an ethical cause that will survive and conquer overall by removing the greater violence. The deaths and injuries are not for a hopeless cause and hence can be morally justified. Here we look at a consequentialist theories because when we guarantee a desirable outcome, then the action in question such as the death of multiple soldiers become morally right.
When starting a just war, a country should keep in mind the possible end result of that war. If there is a higher chance that the results or consequences would be better than the situation that exists if the war does not take place, then they could start a war and work their hardest to improve the situation. In this scenario, the utilitarianism theory is applied as the greatest amount of good, for the greatest amount of the people affected by the action is considered. There is a wider community in focus in which the consequences of the action are taken into consideration.
Finally, a war is justified when a nation is economically attacking another nation and causing the people of that nation to suffer poverty and the pains of hunger. To be the cause of pain and hunger is a major crisis for a country and is always unethical, and it needs to be prevented. In this case, the interests are being distributed. Therefore, we apply the ethics of egoism theory, where we pursue our desires and interests. There is a very limited insight into what might be the consequence, but there is a will to achieve good. To fight back is more ethical than suffering in silence.
Plato, an Athenian philosopher, once said, "Only the dead see the end of war." And in my opinion, he couldn't be more right. Imagine losing a loved one to the brutality of war, or imagine yourself in the wake of such destruction and death. It might give you goosebumps, but believe me, there are millions of people out there who lost everything to this nightmare unleashed upon them due to the greed of the world. It's true that since the beginning, humans have resorted to violence as a way to settle disagreements. And even today, the situation is not much different. Wars bring untold misery as well as political and economic instability. People's lives and daily existence come under threat. All wars are unjust and unethical. Soldiers kill people who have done them and their nation no harm at all. and they are killed in turn by the soldiers on the opposite side of conflict. Non-combatants, including children and elderly, die in war, even if every effort is made to avoid killing them.
Mistakes are made and people die. War kills, destroys property, and ravages the environment. Even after the bombs stop falling and the bullets stop flying, the effects of war linger and more die. Everything that is happening in Syria, Palestine, Sudan, Iraq, and Libya, and many other countries is a dire reflection of the tragedy wars bring. Some are scared emotionally and physically for life. So unless all the options have exhausted out, war should never be initiated. With that being said, I would thank everyone to listen to this presentation patiently. I hope now you understand the ethical issues and dilemmas of war.